Hey, welcome back to Catcher in the Rye. We're talking chapters 8 to 11 today. If you are in the white book, we're starting on page 55. Actually, back a little bit, 53. And if you are on the PDF, we're starting on page 29. Now, as we last left Holden, he was leaving Pensy, right? He's going for several days to just hang out and wander around in New York. And one of the last things he thought about was his mom buying him these skates, right? She bought him the wrong skates, and he felt bad that she spent all this money on this gift that he doesn't want. And also, he knows he's got to go home and talk to his mom and tell his mom that he's got kicked out of his third school, right? Now, I think this kind of helps explain why he says the nice things to Mrs. Morrow that he does, right? So as he's getting ready to leave on page 53 and 29, we get a reference to the red hat. So if you're writing about symbols, this would be a good one to put on. Quick reminder that the red hat means that when he wears it, he's demonstrating his confidence, right? It's not that this is a security blanket or something which makes him feel confident or feel good, because if it did, and if it had that effect on him, he'd wear it all the time, right? But he frequently takes it off because he's embarrassed and he doesn't want to get judged by people, which indicates his immaturity, right? Now here he wears it, but there's no one around, so he is wearing it in public. It's not that he's back in his dorm room, but it's not that big a deal because there's no one else to see it. My ears were nice and warm though. The hat I bought had ear laps on it, and I put them on. I didn't give a damn how I looked. Nobody was around anyway. Evan was in the sack, right? So Evan's asleep, and he's on this train in the middle of the night, and this woman, Ernest Morrow's mother, and Ernest Morrow is one of the guys who he goes to school with, and he does not like Ernest Morrow at all. Now, Ernest Morrow is not a nice kid, right? He treats other kids really badly, and he's kind of a jerk to them, and he's mean, and he's not really well liked at all, right? Now, on page 30, it says, and page 54 in the book, it said, her son was doubtless the biggest bastard that ever went to Pensy in the whole crummy history of the school. He was always going down the corridor after he'd had a shower, snapping a soggy old wet towel on people. That's exactly the kind of guy he was, right? So he just goes around messing with people and trying to hurt people. But Holden doesn't want the kid's mom to know that, right? I think he feels bad about his own mom and how disappointed and sad she's going to be. And if Ernest Morrow's mother knew that her son was growing up to be this type of person, she'd feel really bad about that too, and she would probably feel some responsibility for it, right? And on page 55, we can see that Ernest Morrow's mother has a very than other people do, right? It said sometimes, so on page 30, she says, well, he's a very sensitive boy. He's never been a terribly good mixer with other boys. Perhaps he takes things a little more seriously than he should at his age. Sensitive, that killed me. The guy Morrow was about as sensitive as a toilet seat. Now, he wants her to feel good about herself and also about her son. And so he starts talking about all these different things, right? Now, going on, he knows that he's going to grow up right here on page 31, and it said, right that minute the conductor came around for old Mrs. Morrow's ticket, and it gave me a chance to quit shooting. I'm glad I shot for a while, though. You take a guy like Morrow that's always snapping his towel on people, really trying to hurt somebody with it, and they don't just stay a rat while they're a kid. They stay a rat their whole life. But I'll bet after all this crap I shot, Mrs. Morrow will keep on thinking of him now as this very shy, modest guy that wouldn't let us nominate him for president. She might, you can't tell. Mothers aren't too sharp about that kind of stuff. Now, Holden is being kind and compassionate there. And a lot of the things that happen in this book, most things actually, are kind of a direct reaction to something that just happened before it, right? Now, just before that was when he was feeling bad about his mom and the skates, and so his reaction to that is to try to make this other person's mom feel better about herself. Now, he does hit on her and asks her if she wants to have a cocktail with him, which is weird. Certainly, she's in her 40s and he's 17. But it's also weird that she came and sat down right next to him, right? Like, so imagine if you were in a movie theater back in the past times when we could do such things, and you go into the movie theater and you're the only one in there, and you sit down right in the middle, and you're waiting for the show to start, and just before the credits, all of a sudden some other person walks in, and you kind of looking at them out the corner of your eye, and all of a sudden they come sit right next to you, right? So anyway, weird both ways. Now, going on to chapter 9, one of the topics you can write in paper about is the importance of communication, right? And if you're going to write that paper, one of the things you want to show first is why Holden needs to communicate and evidence that he wants to. There's frequently in the book, he will talk about wanting to give someone a buzz or give someone a call or talk to somebody. And we get some instances of that here right in the beginning of chapter 9. So page 32 on the PDF and page 59 in the book. Said, I thought of giving Jane Gallagher's mother a buzz and find out when Jane's vacation started, but I didn't feel like it. Besides, it was pretty late to call up. I thought of calling this girl I used to go around with quite frequently, Sally Hayes, because I knew her Christmas vacation had started already. But I was afraid her mother would answer the phone. Then I thought of calling up this guy that I went to Wooten School when I was there with, Carl Luce, but I didn't like him much, so I ended up not calling anybody, right? Now, just evidence like that shows that he does want to talk and need to talk, right? When Allie died, his parents were going to put him into psychotherapy, as we talked about yesterday, but they didn't. And perhaps if they had, he would be in a much better spot now. Now, on page 33 on the PDF and page 60 in the book, we get another symbol coming up, the ducks, right? So remember when the ducks came up the first time, Mr. Spencer, his teacher was asking him about the future and what's going to happen to him, and rather than think about that, he thinks about the ducks, right? So in the life of the duck, natural change is the coming of winter, right? It's a difficult change, but most ducks end up okay. They fly south. I'm not saying it's easy, but most of them do. For humans, this natural change that he's comparing it to is growing up, right? And growing up is not easy. It's not easy to be a teenager, right? It's a fairly difficult time in your life, actually, and but most people end up okay, right? So whenever he's asking about the ducks, he's really kind of asking about himself, right? Now, next time the duck comes up is he's talking to the cab driver and said, okay, I said, then I thought of something all of a sudden. Hey, listen, you know those ducks in the lagoon right near Central Park South, that little lake? By any chance, do you happen to know where they go, the ducks, when it gets all frozen over? Do you happen to know by any chance? I realized it was only one in a million. He turned around and looked at me like I was a madman. What are you trying to do, bud? Kid me? No, I'm just interested, that's all. Now, a couple things here. One, when he said kid me, he could be, say, joking with me, right? You're kidding somebody. But by using the word kid, it also is one of those another labels that applies to Holden being young and a kid. Now, I don't know why nobody knows where the ducks go. The ducks is a bad symbol. I'm sorry, Mr. Salinger. It's just dumb. But even the cab driver apparently doesn't know, and Holden doesn't know either, though he appears to be a fairly well-educated young person. Anyway, going on. So then he goes to this hotel. Right now, hotel is kind of his first trip into adult life, right? He's on his own for the first time, and he's on his own for the first time, and he, can go wherever he wants and do whatever he wants, and no one's there to tell him no. And as we've talked about, he's also pretty obsessed with sex and thinking about it a lot and worrying about it a lot because it doesn't appear that he has had sex. So after the scene with the mom on the train, then he comes here, and when he checks into his hotel room, the first thing he sees is a bunch of very adult behavior going on, right? We have people dressing up in women's clothes, and we have, a couple who are filling their mouths with either booze or water and spitting it on each other. And this kind of both interests Holden and bothers him. But we also get some evidence here, so page 34 on the PDF and page 62 in the book, that he is looking for a much more innocent relationship than he has read, than this is. And it said, it might seem like quite a lot of fun in a crummy way, and if you were both drunk and all to get a girl and squirt water or something all over each other's face. The thing is, though, I don't like the idea. It stinks if you analyze it. I think if you don't really like a girl, you shouldn't horse around with her at all. And if you do like her, then you're supposed to like her face. And if you like her face, you ought to be careful about doing crummy stuff to it, like squirting water all over it. Now, this is the type of thing and we see coming up here in a little bit when he talks about his relationship with Jane, how they used to hold hands all the time, right? Now, at 17, he talks to people like Stradlater, and he's feeling peer pressure that he should be more sexually active than he is. And I think he wants to be, but I also think he's worried about it, right? And I don't know that he feels like he is mature enough for it as he starts to think about these types of relationships that he'd rather have. Going on. So his reaction to feeling kind of young and immature by all these people who are doing the stuff in the hotel is he calls up a prostitute, right? So he's made to feel immature, and so he does something to feel mature. He feels bad about his own mom, so he tries to make the other mom feel better. Now, Faith Cavendish is a prostitute of something to that effect anyway. And this guy he knew in school gave her his name. And so it's, he's calling her up, and but she says she's unavailable that night, right? And then she asks if he could get together the next night, and he kind of chickens out, right? So He tries to do something mature, and then he's made to feel immature again because he chickens out and doesn't go through with it. So then he goes out to the club and tries to meet people. Right now, on the start of chapter 10, page 36 in the PDF, and 67, we get a lot of information about Phoebe, rather, right, and why he likes her so much. She's very smart, she's nice, she understands you, she understands movies, and, the thing with Phoebe, similar to Allie, and also in a way similar to Mr. Spencer, is they are still all authentic people, right? Kids don't care what other people think, and they do things they want to do because they want to do them. As you get older, that gets harder, right? As you become a teenager and you start worrying about peer pressure and your reputation, all these things, that gets harder to kind of do your own thing. And Holden really likes that, right? He views doing things because other people either want you to or expect you to, or you do things because you want a specific reaction for them. You want to impress the cool people. He views that as big phony, right? So Phoebe is still in that authentic because she hasn't grown up yet. Anyway, going on. And then he meets these three women at the bar, right? Now, he starts to talk to them. They're quite a bit older, and they were probably about 30, right? And he's 17. Now, generally, 17-year-olds don't go up and start to hit on 30-year-olds because 30-year-olds would not be interested, and these women are not interested either. But he does start to dance with them, right? Now, on page 38 in the PDF and bottom 70, top of 71 in the white book, so he's dancing with this attractive older blonde woman, right? Now, without getting into graphic detail, I think generally one would expect a 17-year-old dude in that instance to be thinking about how great it is to be dancing with this attractive blonde woman, right? He's not thinking about that, right? He's just thinking about what a great dancer she is, right? So he's not thinking about any sexual possibility or anything like that. He's just really impressed with her dancing. But it was worth it. The blonde was some dancer. She was one of the best dancers I've ever danced with. I'm not kidding. Some of these very stupid girls can knock you out on the dance floor. Anyway, you can really dance, I told the blonde one. You ought to be a pro. I mean it. I danced with a pro once, and you're twice as good as she was. Have you ever heard of Marco and Miranda? Now, he's focused on much more innocent things. Now, they also keep asking about his age, and they ask if his dad has a date for the night and what they're going to do. So, he had called the prostitute because he wanted to feel more mature, and they chickened out, which made him feel immature. So then he went to the bar to try to hit on the women, which made him feel mature, and then they keep making fun of him and asking if his dad is interested in getting together that night. A couple things I like in the scene very quickly, and then we'll be about done. On page 73, I lost it on here, but here we go. Page 40 in the PDF and 73 in the book. They didn't invite me to sit down at their table, mostly because they were too ignorant, but I sat down anyway. So he's been talking to these women all night. They go sit at their table, and they don't invite him to sit over, and he's like, oh, they're just too ignorant to invite me. So he goes and sits down anyway and tells them that his name is Jim Steele. Going on, they talk about seeing movie stars, and then he takes off. Right. Now, last chapter, chapter 11, we get some information about Jane and his relationship with Jane. Right. Now, all these instances where he's meeting older women and hitting on the mom or hitting on the women in the bar, calling the prostitute, and then he starts to think about Jane. And it said, I don't mean, I really got to know her quite intimately. I don't mean it was anything physical or anything, it wasn't, but we saw each other all the time. You don't always have to get too sexy to get to know a girl. They talk about things they used to do together. They used to read a lot, she used to read a lot of poetry. And it said on page 77 and 42, she was always reading poetry, and she read a lot of very good books. She read a lot of poetry and all. She was the only one outside of my family that I ever showed Allie's baseball mitt to with all the poems on it. She'd never met Allie or anything because it was her first summer in Maine. Before that, she went to Cape Cod, but I told her quite a lot about him. She was interested in that kind of stuff. Now, if you're writing the paper about communication, this would be good evidence that it appears that Jane is the only person he's talked to about Allie's death, right? So by showing her the baseball mitt, what that implies is that he's had to talk to her about who the mitt belonged to in that person's story. And she seems to be the only person in the whole book that he has talked to about that. Last thing, we get the story of the stepfather who comes out and she starts to cry, and we never really find out what happened in that instance, but it appears something good didn't happen. Something bad happened. And that's about it for today. We get one last thing that I won't read to because I'm about out of time, but how much he enjoyed holding hands with Jane, right? And we talk about Holden being a pretty innocent kid, and that's the type of relationship he's looking for. So thank you.